think it's safe to say that the Fuji X100VI is one of the most hyped cameras of this year. This camera has been generating a ton of buzz, and I feel very thankful to get my hands on this camera. I've now had this camera for just over 3 months, and I've had the chance to travel internationally with it, as well as bring it on some commercial shoots that I've done and shoot some behind the scenes photos, and just use it for everyday life. One of the standout features for the X100V is its video capabilities. The video quality is significantly better than any of the other previous versions of this camera, and if you're looking for quality video, this is the camera to go with. I don't want to go into a ton of detail about the video specs on this. I made a completely different video about this, but in short, the video is incredible. Some of the standouts are the stabilization, the image quality, and the ability to shoot an F-log. And if you're serious about your video production, these are a big deal. So admittedly, I have barely used the video features on this camera, and I think I know why. So when I've had this camera with me, I've also had another camera with me that I'm trying out or using, whether it's on a trip or on a job. And those cameras have kind of been the center of attention for capturing videos in those occasions, so I just haven't had a really good chance to dive into the video on this specific camera. That's just been my experience, and I still think the video is insane, and I'd like to use it more moving forward. So other than the fact that this camera is new and shiny and difficult to get, I think one of the largest improvements on this camera is its high resolution. I mean, if you're looking to upgrade from the X100V, I can imagine that resolution would be one of the reasons why you would upgrade. For me, candidly, I am not super interested in high resolution cameras, at least right now, because the majority of my photos are not being printed on billboards for thousands of people to see. And personally, I don't love storing a lot of large files on my computer, many of which I will not use. However, I do appreciate the high megapixels on this camera specifically because while I'm shooting, I can digitally zoom into the sensor and crop the photos how I'd like them while shooting. You can set this up in the menus, and it essentially turns your camera's prime lens into a zoom lens. This is new to the X100VI, and this has made the shooting experience, at least for me, a lot more fun. In theory, this gives your camera lens a 35, a 50, and a 70mm lens while you're shooting. Optically, a photo shot on a 50mm versus the 50mm crop on this are not going to look identical, but it's a creative way to use this lens and make the shooting experience more fun. This has been an awesome tool for helping me frame images in camera, and it has definitely improved my shooting experience. Speaking of experience, if you want an experience while shooting with a camera, you're going to love the X100 series. There's just something to holding a small camera like this and having the tactile feel that a camera like this has. Not to mention that viewing a film recipe through the eyepiece or on the back of the camera is very pleasing and makes the shooting experience very, very fun. However, this experience can also be found with previous X100 versions, as well as almost every other version of a Fuji camera. The price tag for this camera is pretty steep, and if money is no object for you or you really need these specs, this might be the camera for you. Otherwise, sticking with a previous version of the X100 series or a different Fuji camera might be a more economical option. I feel that the X100V is actually a pretty good first camera for the majority of people. It features a 35mm lens, which is a really great focal length to learn how to take photos on. And even for advanced users, a 35mm is a staple all-in-one lens. What's great about the lens on the Fuji X100VI is that it has an aperture of 2.0, which is awesome if you want photos with depth of field. However, there are some limitations. You may want wider or tighter images, and a 35mm may not be the most versatile lens for you, especially if you're coming from a cell phone, which has multiple lens options. And I think there are some solutions for this. The digital cropping has helped me with this, and I feel I can use this in more situations, but there are also adapters that you can screw onto the front of this camera because the lens on this cannot be changed. I do believe that a 35mm is a great lens for a camera like this, especially if you're a beginner. You can learn the limitations and advantages to a lens like this, and overall, learning to master a 35 makes you a stronger shooter. But as somebody who has been shooting for a long time, 35 is not always my favorite focal length. I swear the 35mm on this camera is like slightly tighter than 35mm. At times it feels like it's more of a 40mm. I can't say that for sure. It's this theory I have, but assuming this is a true 35mm, I find myself wanting more of a 28 or a 50mm. But that's just my personal preference. I do think this lens is really great. I would imagine if you're comparing buying the Fuji camera to a different brand of camera, you're likely choosing between the Fuji X100VI or the Leica Q2 or Q3. While the Fuji is significantly cheaper than the Leicas at $2,000 to $2,500, you can also get a Sony or Canon camera and possibly even a second lens for the price that you'd be paying for the Fuji X100VI. I feel it's wise to determine what you're going to be using this camera for and what kind of money you're willing to spend on it. Because this camera is so small, it has encouraged me to bring this camera around more, and it's made it more fun to shoot with. I don't treat this camera as my everyday workhorse, especially when I'm shooting commercial work. This camera has been ideal for everyday moments and perfect for carrying on trips or even around every day because there's no reason not to because it's so small. I've found that I've been capturing more everyday in between moments just because this is with me, and I prefer to do it on here versus my cell phone because when they're on my cell phone, they just kind of live in the camera roll and nothing happens with them. Whereas when they're shot on here, these moments feel like they're captured more authentically and intentionally. Some of my favorite places that I've brought this camera are on commercial shoots to capture behind the scenes, or on wedding days to capture a different kind of vibe and look than what I'd be capturing on my Sony cameras. Is the Fuji X100VI worth buying? If you're a video enthusiast or you require the higher megapixels for the work that you're shooting, then absolutely yes, this camera is amazing. However, if you already own a previous version of an X100 camera and you don't see these new features as being compelling enough to justify the steep price tag, then you might as well stay put. I mean, all around, I am very happy with the X100VI that I have, but I think for yourself, you need to consider what you're gonna be shooting with this, what your price tag is, and how important are these new features for your day-to-day. I've really enjoyed shooting on this camera for the past 3 months, but I don't know if I've really noticed the updates from my X100V. Many of the updates are very, very small, and I don't wanna discount that compounding upgrades over time over many models does make a large difference over time, but the upgrade from the X100V to the X100VI is quite small, at least for me. If you are considering buying an X100 camera, I would recommend visiting your local camera store and trying one out there or renting one for a week. Or maybe you can find a really nice friend who will lend you their camera for a week or two. Try before you buy. Maybe we can make that a motto of this channel. Anyways, thanks for sitting down with me for a couple minutes. My name's Davey, and thanks for letting me spill the gravy. I've got a couple other videos on Fuji cameras and stuff on my channel, so check those out. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next one.